We start this next section with how do I develop my favorite problems, right? What is a favorite problems list? Well, a favorite problems list is a series of open-ended questions that you want to guide your projects and prime your subconscious. These are your sort of North Star problems. Tiago Forte, who's the author of the book Building a Second Brain, describes these questions as having multiple purposes. One, they remind you of which interests captivated your attention in the past and may be worth revisiting. Two, giving you a filter for deciding which information you're consuming so that it helps move forward your long-term goals. And three, focusing your reading and learning where it has the highest chance of actually making a difference in your life and in the projects you're working on. I think these concepts align nicely also with Cal Newport's concepts for developing skills. If we know these questions, then we might be able to unearth our interests, or at least gaps that we can recognize the need for skill development. That brings us to the idea of career capital. What is career capital? What does that mean? There are specific traits that exist in what are thought of as desirable jobs. Those jobs are typically creativity, or those traits are typically creativity, impact, control, and fun. And the idea of career capital is that if you want to have a job or a career that has these traits in it, you need the capital to spend to get it. This is just economics. It's a supply and demand situation. Competition for these desirable jobs means you need a form of capital to spend to attain the job. Cal Newport describes having skills that are rare and valuable as the key to getting career capital. Tim Ferriss has a concept of this that's somewhat similar. That is being a generalist specialist. He describes that a generalist is going to look at things a little differently than a specialist. For instance, mastering a skill does not mean perfecting it. A specialist overestimate the time necessary to become a master of a skill. They think in terms of perfectionism. A generalist understands the 80-20 rule. The idea being that 20% of a topic or a skill set actually makes up 80% of the effectiveness of the mastery of that concept. So 20% of the language vocabulary, for instance, can get you by. 20% of a dance type, salsa, tango, is going to make you competent. 20% of the moves for a sport are all you need to have a certain level of mastery. So focusing in on the 20% necessary for 2 years of intense study might not feel any different from the person who takes 10 years to master the entirety of that topic. That's the benefit of being a generalist, so to speak. Generalists also end up running the show. The people who have defined broad combined skill sets are the ones who can predict, innovate, and rise to power faster. Also, boredom is failure. The concept that by broadening your topics of study to be a generalist will continue to develop intellectual stimulation. The argument is made that depression and emotional bankruptcy is more driven by lack of intellectual stimulation. This is also partially true about burnout. The other arguments that Tim makes is that unless you're truly brilliant at one thing, don't be a specialist, because you're probably not going to be the penultimate of that skill. Combining 2 or 3 skill sets creates innovation. And then also make sure that those skills are rare and valuable. This syncs up with Cal Newport. We're hand-picking skills that are going to be rare and valuable to combine them to be a generalist specialist so that we have career capital. But this gets us back to those questions we want to develop. You want to have a broad array of questions that you're actually developing for yourself, right? I'll give you a couple examples from questions that I've been developing. How do you integrate storytelling into education to improve transferring and retention of knowledge, right? How do you design a curriculum specifically for online cohorts? What are the specific exercises and activities that have the most impact on longevity? Some other ones that I personally love is how can you help reduce adult or child anxiety and fear of activities? What are the most important parenting activities to raise resilient, gritty kids? So these are some of the concepts these are some of the questions that I find important that I'm hoping will drive some of the projects I'm moving forward, right? So below, this is a newsletter from Tiago Forte and sort of the steps that he uses to develop his favorite problems or favorite questions. They're the exercise that I went through to help me develop the questions that I've kind of come up with at this point in time that I shared with you. And so go ahead and take your time. It takes time. Don't try and knock it out in one day, to be honest. think about it, mull over it, start to frame these things and create them. Don't also take too much time. There's a concept called Parkinson's Law. Parkinson's Law is that a task is going to take however much time you assign for it. So if you say, oh, I'm going to get these favorite problems done in the next year, guess what? You're going to take a year. If you say over the next 2 weeks, it'll be faster. It'll be in 2 weeks. You're going to give yourself a deadline. So Parkinson's Law.